Hi, and thank you for listening. Welcome to another installation of our conversations about what's working to engage young people. My name is Hannah. I'm a research associate here at Springtide, and I'm with Alexandra Meyer, who's the managing director at GatherDC. Alexandra, thank you for being here.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's so fun to see you again, Hannah.
I'm really excited about this conversation. I loved learning more about the work you guys are doing. So, just to start, tell us a little bit about GatherDC.
Of course. So, GatherDC is a Jewish nonprofit. We work with Jews in their 20s and 30s in the greater Washington, D.C. region to connect them to each other, to our thriving local Jewish ecosystem, and to facilitate a meaningful adult Jewish identity wherever they end up going in life. Ultimately, Gather DC is about relationships and people at the heart of Judaism. And we want all young adults to have a relevant, active, and meaningful Jewish life that sustains them throughout our tradition. Day to day, we do sort of three buckets of work. So the first is really the heart of what we do, which is we have a trained team of professional engagers, and they're the ones who are out there on the ground meeting with young adults one-on-one over coffee, which is a conduit to relationship building. You know, it's not all about coffee, but they're meeting in those third spaces to really get to know people, form deep and meaningful relationships, build that trust and authenticity that allows us to get to know someone, their Jewish journey, where they're coming from, where they're going, their likes and dislikes. And through that, our engagement team can help get them connected to people, places, spaces, and resources, where they can find Jewish community. For about 20% of the people that we connect with, though, they're not yet ready to connect to other organizations and spaces. They're still seeking, they are digging deep, they are figuring out who they are as a Jewish adult. And for those individuals, we create our own experiences. Those can be learning cohorts, fellowships, retreats, holiday experiences that are really unique to the specific needs of those individuals. And of course, we can't ignore the digital space when working with young people. We really see the digital space as a way to remove information barriers and, up the level of transparency around information in the community. So we have a team of people who, run a community calendar, a weekly newsletter, of course, all of the other digital platforms. We pull together holiday guides that really can reduce the barrier to finding information.
It's really great. And one of the things that I found really interesting in one of our previous conversations was how you guys connect with young people, this process that you guys have. So tell me a little bit about Gather DC's philosophy about connecting with young people.
Yeah, we have a whole methodology, Hannah. We call it relationship-based engagement. And it really is the relational methodology that undergirds all the work that we do at GatherDC. So relationship-based engagement is a systemic and systematic methodology and tool that centers people at the heart of everything that is happening. It is all about building trust, being authentic, and creating spaces for belonging. And it's about weaving thick ties in community, thick webs in community together. So everything we do is undergirded by this. And I want to give an example of how we really meet young people in terms of, what it's like. We have this tool called Meeting People Where They're At, physically, emotionally, and Jewishly. And so RBE in practice in this tool looks like, we reduce the barrier to someone's travel time and where they're going. Young adults are the first to say, hi, I'm busy, I can't meet. So how do we just make it easy for them to say yes to a conversation, right? We're the ones who travel across town. We'll meet in the coffee shop that you like best. Whatever that is, we want to reduce that barrier. The second piece emotionally is, we're all humans. Even you and me right now, Hannah, we've had so many things happen in our day before this moment that affect how we're showing up right now. And we part of relationship-based engagement is not entering a conversation with an agenda. We care about Jewish life. We want people to have meaningful Jewish identities and plug into our community. But ultimately, that one-on-one meeting cannot be about an agenda of what's out there, getting you connected, etc. It has to be about the person. And so we're going to meet you where you are emotionally on that day, which means it might be talking about Jewish life, but honestly, maybe your boss just yelled at you, or maybe you just went through a really hard breakup. We really need to acknowledge where people are coming from emotionally and build that trust before we can get to any sort of, potential agenda even. And then lastly, Jewishly, part of not coming in with an agenda is knowing that young adults are coming from a really broad spectrum of life. One of the things about GatherDC is that we don't promote one form of Judaism over another. We don't promote one political philosophy over another. And we really engage individuals who have a wide background in Jewish life. So we need to be able to meet people where they are, whether they have some Jewish exposure, no Jewish exposure, whether they've been to Jewish day school or not. We meet you where you are. We, want to use language and words that reflect your experience and don't push anyone into a particular Jewish pathway or box or way of life. All of those things really center an individual and make it about building a relationship and being on a journey together. And I think another unique part of this philosophy is that everyone who works at GatherDC is actually in their 20s and 30s. We are in the stage of life that the people we work with are in. We are not older. We're not telling you how to do it or, saying this is how it should be. We're figuring it out too. So I think in a real relational sense, we're sort of peer models. We can show that it's not about getting to a certain place. It's about a relationship and a journey, and it takes a lifetime. And I think we really put that into action.
That's really neat. One of the phrases you used was thick ties, which I found really interesting. Can you say more about what you mean by that?
Yeah. I always like to think of community in a very sort of like natural sense, right? Communities ebb and flow, they grow and expand. And, sort of, even if you imagine like the people Hannah, like, right, there's sort of like a web of connection, right? Maybe you're at the center and, life is connected and organizations and people and groups of friends. And ultimately, like the thick ties, if you sort of, right, if we take that metaphor of like a spider web, we want there to be thick ties. So that people feel like they have a strong sense of, I go to this organization for this, but if I show up here, I will see people that I also know, right? And sort of having more connected lines throughout a community rather than just siloing people inside one community, one organization, one group of friends. That feeling when you walk down the street and you run into someone that you know and you're like, hey, and you catch up for a minute on the corner before you go your separate ways. That idea of thick ties is what really, I think, strengthens a community and makes people really feel like they belong.
Belonging was exactly the word I was going to use. Mm-hmm. Like while you were talking, I was thinking about some of Springtide's research about belonging. And I'm really intrigued by what seems really unique about the work you guys are doing, in part, but so many things, but in part is the way you're trying to cultivate belonging across organizational participation. How do you do that? How do you create belonging like across many organizations where a young person can feel connected to the Jewish community regardless of which organization they participate in?
It is a super unique part of our work, Hannah. So one of the things that I think is helpful to know is GatherDC isn't a traditional community model in the sense that there are no dues. There's no like in and out. There's no like in club or out club here. We're really like a platform and a resource and a group of people. And about 80% of the people that we work with, we're connecting to other organizations in the Jewish community locally. We really believe in that like all boats rise together mentality. And, if you find your community at another organization, that is amazing. That is success. And so we measure success very differently in that way. We certainly can't control other organizations, but what we can do is be in deep relationship with the other professionals, the lay leaders out in our community. Every month we actually gather a group of Jewish professionals who work with people in their 20s and 30s at our office, and we have trend conversations, and we talk about people, and we think about upcoming holidays, and we do learning together. And I think that creates a real sense of both camaraderie, but also that we're all trying to achieve the same thing. We're all moving in the same direction, and being that mirror of relationality can invite other people into bringing that sense of relationship-based engagement into their own organization. And so I think we try really, really hard to do that every day.
Really neat. One of the things that it seems like you guys are constantly in this cycle of listening, adapting, listening, adapting. So I'm curious, what does it look like for you guys to adapt your organization to meet the needs of young people?
Yeah. Hannah, I feel like you know this at Springtide, whether you're working with, I don't know, it's kids, teenagers, young adults, if you're working with any youth population, change is inevitable. And having that philosophy of change is going to happen helps to sort of level set, that it's going to happen no matter what. And you really need to be in a learning mindset all the time, because trends, whether they're social, cultural, usually do come from youth populations. And so it certainly helps to be in that mindset. GatherDC was actually started as a grassroots lay-led concept. It was first some friends got together, and then it was a listserv, and then it was a calendar, and then a couple happy hours. And over the years, we've become the professional and premier resource and organization that we are today. But we still have a lot of that grassroots thinking embedded in the values of our organization, including adaptability and agility. So I think that mindset has really allowed us to keep pushing the needle on not being afraid of change. We have this concept of trying things out, failing fast. We don't put a lot of weight on failure. I think that's a very sort of Silicon Valley idea, but there's no reason it can't be used in the nonprofit space or, at any organization, really. And that allows us to listen, to try new things, to say oh, that worked, that didn't work, and keep moving forward.
I love that you said that, getting okay with failure is part of it, because in my conversations with organizations, one of the things that I see a lot is that organizations that are able to thrive have to be able to identify when they're not thriving and when something's not working. Failure is a part of it. So okay. I'm curious, how do you all identify when something is no longer working or not working at all?
Yeah. I will say that the why behind our organization, that never changes. People should be the center of relationships. Relationships should be the center of Jewish life. Connectivity, community, those things are evergreen trends in human existence. But we do need to be able to identify when the what isn't working, right? The output. And we have a couple of different tools that we use to do that. One is that we use something called a here and now after every experience that we host. It's just a name that we call it. I think at corporate places, it would be called a postmortem, where we really analyze. Just kind of
that phrase is so funny.
There's a reason we don't use that. But what went well? What felt great? What didn't go well? What didn't feel great? And then we actually use this tool to take all of those things and transform them into new opportunities for the next time we host an experience. So that really, it allows us to reflect on both the good and the bad. And then it pushes us to say what's not working and what are we going to do to transform that for the future in a holistic sense, not in a nobody ate this food, so we'll get different food this time. But actually at a holistic level, how can we change these things? And every month, our team meets for what we call a people strategy meeting, where we are actively in brainstorming mode and conversation about the trends we're seeing, the interventions out in the community that are working, what people are going to, what's not working. Those just having a space where that conversation is very normal and regular really allows us to uncover what's not working and say like, okay, maybe like we won't do that anymore. And that's going to be okay. We have to be sort of like unattached sometimes.
One of our themes for this project is adaptability, which is why I've been asking you all these questions. So like I guess I'm curious about GatherDC's process of listening to young people, identifying when something needs to change and adapting that change. Like what does that look like on the ground for you guys?
Yeah. I mean, it goes back to being in relationship and listening. I don't really think that you can adapt in a silo, Hannah. I think adaptability means you're adapting from something and to something. And ultimately, that requires you to be in a learning mindset and in a listening mode. And at GatherDC, we would say that requires being in relationship with people. So I think in order to adapt, we first have to be in relationship with individuals, to know them really deeply, and to know what we're headed from and what we're headed to. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. So when you are in a relationship, what does it look like to hear from young people that they want something, and then how does that then trickle its way upward to the practice?
So we have a tool that we use, a conversational tool. We call it A to C thinking. And it wouldn't be uncommon to be out in a conversation and maybe, Hannah, somebody says like, I want a Jewish rock climbing group. Well, I think a really common thing to do would be like, okay, I'm going to like find a Jewish rock climbing group for you, or I'll make a Jewish rock climbing group for you, and then you'll be happy. We try to practice like what's the next level. So our engagers are actually going to keep the conversation going. They're going to ask open and honest questions, and they're going to keep digging. And I want a Jewish rock climbing group actually might turn into something that's more like, well, I just moved to town and, in my home state, I had this rock climbing group where I had a lot of Jewish friends and we did all of these outdoorsy things together, like rock climbing and stargazing and hiking. And I always felt really connected to those Jewish friendships in that moment. And all of those experiences made me realize how big the universe is, and I'm connected to something greater than myself. And those were really spiritual and profound moments for me. And now I'm in a new city and I don't have any friends. I'm really lonely. I don't feel connected to anything. And I Googled about a rock climbing group, but it's 45 minutes away and I don't have a car. Okay, now we're adapting and organizing around really human trends, right? Really human relational needs that are very different than a rock climbing group. There are a lot of interventions that could work for this person, and a lot of people that they could connect with that feel the same way. And so it's about being at that level of relationality where we can, build that trust, be authentic. Young people really crave authenticity, and it doesn't take a lot of gimmicks. In fact, it takes no gimmicks to build trust and be authentic. It's just about asking questions and relating and recognizing someone's humanity. And, being lonely and new in a place and not knowing your purpose anymore is really human. And there are a lot of things we can now do, a lot of interventions that might support that person. And so the organizing piece actually that's a much smaller piece. It's really all about the listening and the relationship up until that point. Now that we know more about this person, okay, we can provide a lot of connections, introduce them to a lot of people, and invite them to something that we believe will help bridge the gap for them in these areas.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm curious too, like this is connecting so well to some of our other themes. We have five different themes, and one of the things I think is really interesting and unique to what you guys do is that you're connecting with Jewish young adults at all stages of their Jewish practice and identity. So I'm curious, like, what is it, I guess, what does it look like to practice inclusivity in that relationship building and to think about what young people need from this lens of meeting young people where they're at?
Yeah. It's a really core part of our work, Hannah. That meeting people where they are Jewishly is, it's absolutely necessary for supporting young people to build the Jewish identities they want. So many young people remain unengaged or uninvolved because of either feeling like they don't belong, having bad experiences growing up, maybe feeling like they don't have enough knowledge, or being like, well, I didn't go to summer camp, so I don't know that experience, and that must make me not Jewish enough. And we want to change that so deeply. Your Jewish journey it's a lifelong journey, just like so many other faith traditions. And so we want to meet people where they are, because that level of inclusivity can help someone to enter a space knowing that they are enough, no matter where they are on that journey. So I think a great example is like the people on our team, going back to that concept of peer models. Some of our team is kosher, some's not. Some have tattoos, some don't. Some go to synagogue, some don't. Some grew up with 2 Jewish parents, 1 Jewish parent. Some went through conversion processes. We really can showcase what it means to be a diverse and accepting Jewish community where people can belong, whether they had a B'nai Mitzvah or went to Jewish sleepaway camp or not. I didn't do any of those things, and I now run a Jewish organization. So it's really key that our engagers are trained in many ways, like decenter their experience from a conversation and center the other person's experience. That way that, that person is a whole world, and we can see their whole Jewish humanity without sort of like our own identities interfering in helping them get to where they want to go, not where we think they should go. Because it's not about us, it's about them.
I love the idea of like other people being a whole world. I think that's really beautiful.
Sure.
And I think like organizations that really see young people, I think understand this really well. That young people are, these whole worlds and like whole beings. I'm curious if there's anything in the journey of, establishing GatherDC that has surprised you all in terms of like what has worked with young people.
Yeah. I feel like I'm often surprised by little things every day, Hannah. I'm still surprised that people will meet a stranger at a coffee shop to talk about their Jewish lives. Like, wow, that is incredible. You know, I feel like that must be a sign that humanity isn't lost, that like we're still willing to reach out to each other and have really meaningful conversations.
Yeah.
I'm always surprised at how, that we are able to create these spaces where pretty quickly people let their guard down and will share vulnerable things about their lives and connect on a really deep level. I think that astounds me every day when I hear really inspiring stories and hard stories that people are willing to share with us. And then I'm always surprised that, small groups really do work. It doesn't really surprise me, but it just delights me. I know it to be true. It's a lot easier to make meaningful connection in a group of 12 people than a group of 100 people. And the fact that young adults are willing to come and be in a room where they know they're going to have to participate, right? They're going to be part of the conversation and they want to. They do. I think our world doesn't give as many opportunities to do that.
When you say having people like all together having a conversation, what are those kinds of conversations about? Like what do they look like?
Yeah. So one of the things that we host are what we call learning cohorts, Hannah. And it's a cohort because it's the same group of people for usually 3 to 4 weeks in a row. And that's because sort of the science of connection tells us that a small group of people meeting multiple times is what starts to build those thick ties of connectivity. Where you start to feel like you are in community with one another. So we have conversations about all sorts of things. Some are deeply Jewish. So, for example, we're actually coming up on the high holidays in a couple of weeks, and we'll be hosting something that we call the High Holiday Deep Dive, which is where our community rabbi will lead a conversation for 12 individuals. It'll be part text study, part introspection, part conversation, really digging into the themes and the why behind the Jewish high holidays, not the what that happens at synagogue or on the day of, but like, why does our tradition call us to this moment? And that's a really beautiful, very deep, very Jewish conversation. We also can have conversations around, what does it mean to be in community with one another? Why does Judaism ask us to live our life in community? And as a young adult, what type of community do you want to be involved in? Or we'll also do things that are sort of the cross section, Hannah, between universal topics and Judaism. So what does Judaism have to say about climate change, which is really important to a lot of young people? And I think one of the beautiful things is all of these conversations can land in wildly different spots and wildly similar spots. It's about really like finding a meaning for yourself in the text, stretching yourself to discover new things, hear new perspectives. And, when you center people and you give them something, right? And in this case, the something is Judaism and Jewish wisdom and Jewish text to find meaning over. What you're doing is a meaning-making exercise. The what actually matters a lot less than the relationships that are formed through that deep conversation.
I love that. That's beautiful. And I think I really love the idea of like learning what it means to like to understand your tradition. Like I think just religious literacy, I think across traditions is something that young people, like a lot of them just don't really have, and like learning how to form that and like establish a relationship to your religious tradition in a way that is like connected to like who you are as a person and what you value, and being able to do that in community with other people your age is really special. I'm curious, like, our age group for Springtide is 13 to 25, and you guys are dealing with the older end of that, like, early 20s. I'm curious, like, what you see, like, Jewish young people in their early 20s, like, what are they wrestling with, I guess, like, from your time of listening, like, what do you see them as, like, wrestling with and needing, like, at that moment in their lives?
Yeah. Ultimately, I think this age group is wrestling with purpose and meaning. If you think of sort of the crossover for Springtides and GatherDC, a lot of those individuals are, maybe they're coming out of college, maybe not. Either way, they're sort of starting their adult journey, really, right? In that sort of 21, 22 to 25 age group. And that's a big life change. You are searching for who you are. How do you present yourself, your purpose in the world? What is the meaning of life? Like, oh my gosh, now I have a job and that feels really hard and I'm adjusting to that. I think so much of this age group is searching for connection, community, belonging, and ultimately purpose and meaning. And that really, I think, is in many ways the same, but shifts across. It's not just age, Hannah. We think a lot about life stage, what it means to be 22 to 25, what it means to be sort of like in that late 20s, early 30s period, single, partnered, with children, without. There's so many things that change what someone needs in a moment. We often actually see like a bell curve where somebody might come to us and we have a meaningful relationship when they're 22. Maybe we see them again when they're 25 because they're, having their quarter life crisis. Maybe we see them again when they're 32 because they just went through a major breakup and they're in their 30s and they're thinking about life in a really different way. To me, it always comes back to that meaning and purpose. And we have an education methodology that we call the RAM paradigm, Hannah. It's RAM. It stands for relevant, active, and meaningful. And we really, empower and push and activate young people to build Jewish lives that are relevant to their lives, active to them, and actually meaningful to them. not what someone else passed on to them or told them to do. And young people, I think, in this stage of life are really looking to build who they are on their own 2 feet, on their own terms, their own purpose, and their own meaning. And our education methodology combined with being relational, I think for the first time really shows that, that age group that you can do this and it's in your power and it's what you want and it has to be authentic to you.
I love that. That's beautiful. A lot of the like people who are going to watch this video are people who work with young people in some capacity. So we at Springtide call them trusted adults, but they're often teachers or youth ministers or some other type of like youth worker. I'm curious, what I guess would you say to people who are maybe struggling to form meaningful relationships with young people or support young people on their journey that you've learned at GatherDC?
I used this phrase earlier, Hannah, but in Judaism, we really believe that every person is a universe unto themselves. And I think that's true when you are a child, when you're a teenager, when you're a young adult, and, the rest of your life. We should treat young people, no matter what age they are or life stage they're in, as whole humans who are on their journey. I think young people, certainly, the individuals we work with and our audience and community members, they don't want to be spoken down to. They don't want to be told what to do. They don't want to hear that they have to do X, Y, and Z to be a certain way. Relating to people authentically doesn't have to mean automatically creating an adult-child, relationship. It's two humans having a relationship. And I think for those of us who are in, to use a Springtide phrase, like relational authority or trusted adults, treating the other person like they are a whole human, and this is just their moment in life where they are. That is really, in my mind, what I've learned builds trust and authenticity and that feeling of belonging.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Where can other people learn more about the work of GatherDC?
Yeah. You can find us online at gatherdc.org. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram at also gatherdc.org. You can find out about all of the other work we do. We have a sibling city out in the East Bay in California, doing this work on the ground, on the West Coast. And we have a whole part of our organization that actually trains other organizations in this work. And you can find out about that at gatherbetter.org, or just hit me up in my email and I would love to chat and connect with you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Alexandra. This was great. I loved hearing about the work you guys are doing.
I love talking with you, Hannah. Thank you.